Becoming Muhammad Ali, a novel by Kwame Alexander and James Patterson. Round 1. I remember everything. You probably would have too. That night was a piece of American history. The Clay family phone was a dusky black with a rotary dial, and it sat on a wooden table in the neat-as-a-pin living room of the little house on Grand Avenue in Louisville, Kentucky. Some 20 of us were crammed like sardines into the room, waiting for that phone to ring. Waiting for Cassius to call home. It was a February night in 1958, and I remember it like it was yesterday. My best friend Cassius was 300 miles north in Chicago, and that night he was fighting for a championship in the Golden Gloves boxing tournament. Cassius wasn't a professional yet, just an amateur. Tall, but a little skinny and a lot raw. Only 16 years old like me. I'm Lucius, by the way. Nice to meet you. You can call me Lucky. All my friends do. Cassius had already won plenty of bouts all over Kentucky, but the Chicago Golden Gloves was the big time. When he won there, and we all knew he would, it would be lights out. From now on, people everywhere would know the name Cassius Clay. And so we waited for the phone to ring. I remember that living room was so packed with family and friends and neighbors that we could hardly move. The smell of roast chicken and sweet potato pie and cheese grits mixed with the smell of paint and turpentine. Mr. Clay, Cassius' dad, who everybody called Cash, was a sign and billboard painter, and he kept his work supplies right there in the house. "Mrs. Clay," somebody called out, "when that boy of yours gets famous, he ought to buy you a bigger house." "Oh, you know he will," she answered. Then she looked right at me. "Isn't that right, Lucius?" "Yes, ma'am, you know it is. Cassius promised you a big house." I remember that Mrs. Clay was too nervous to eat, but she wasn't too nervous to talk about how proud she was. "My Cassius did everything early," she was saying to a group of ladies. "He crawled early, talked early, walked on his toes like a dancer." The ladies all laughed, as if they hadn't heard that story 100 times before, but Mrs. Clay just couldn't help it. Cassius always told her he was bound to be the greatest, with a capital G, and she believed it with all her heart. So did I. So did everybody in Louisville's West End. "Come on, phone, ring! Phone, ring-a-ding-ding!" The men and boys around the room, including Cassius's little brother Rudy, looked at one another with big grins and made punching motions with their fists. The big fight should be over by now. Under those bright lights in the middle of that huge Chicago stadium, Cassius would be standing tall in the ring with one hand over his head like he always. His opponent next to him with his head bowed down in defeat. Then the phone rang. It was Cassius with news about the fight, and he told it like only Cassius could tell a story. If you want to hear more of the story about how Cassius Clay grew up to become Muhammad Ali, check out Becoming Muhammad Ali by Kwame Alexander and James Patterson from the school library.